So we're going to be leading off here. And this hand's a keep. We have turn 1 Chalice, so hopefully that'll be good in whatever the matchup is. Sometimes you just have to hope that your best form of hate is going to be effective. And in this hand, turn 1 Chalice is nice. We also have some spot removal, so if we're up against an aggressive deck, we're pretty well set up. And then, of course, Nahiri as a closer. Here's an Elvish Mystic. Okay, so maybe our opponent's on an elf deck of some sort, which Anger of the Gods could happen to be very good against. I am going to play the Chalice on 1. Elves happen to have a decent amount of 1 mana creatures, so perhaps this will be quite good. Crossing our fingers. So here's a Misty. Could also be a different deck. Like it could be like a Green Devotion deck. There's lots of options here. The most likely thing is Black Green Elves. Okay, so Archdruid kind of a giveaway that we are up against just a Black Green Elf deck, which I think we're okay with given our hand. Blood Moon isn't going to be great on this board because normally there's not that many black cards, so it just kind of shuts off the Overgrown Tomb. I'm going to Helix away this Elvish Archdruid before it gets out of hand. We don't have the second red mana yet, so kind of banking on finding that for this Anger of the Gods. And we're hoping that our opponent has a lot of 1 mana elves stuck in hand. Although this deck does typically play cards like Collected Company and Quarter Calling, so since our opponent is just passing the turn here potentially, that's going to signify Collected Company in a big way. So not a ton of good options. I'm just going to play the Blood Moon, even though it's not doing a ton for us, but it could actually help us fix our mana a little bit. Say we draw a non-basic land, like say we draw a Gemstone Caverns, all of a sudden it's a mountain, and it helps us to cast this Anger of the Gods, so gives us more outs to find the second red source. Now, if this company is a big company, like okay, so it's going to be what I would call a big company. It's a good company. It found Azuri and Scavenging Ooze. That's bad news. And we're banking even more on this Anger of the Gods now. So here's a lead, the Stampede. We're hoping our opponent shows us lots of 1 mana elves on this. So it's going to be Llanowar Elves. Doesn't matter. Dwinnen's Elite, though, is pretty good, actually. So our opponent could just play the Dwinnen's Elite here, and then we basically have 1 turn to top deck the red source, or else we're in a bad spot. Or our opponent can leave up Regeneration, which it looks like our opponent's leaving up a Regeneration shield on the Azuri. So what we can do now instead is play the Nahiri, which I'm going to do, and I'm just going to exile this Azuri, keeping the Anger in hand, and just letting the Nahiri basically die. We don't really care about the Nahiri as much as angering away our opponent's board in the future is kind of the idea here. So I'm going to play Nahiri, -2 on the Azuri. Our opponent can make the Scavenging Ooze up to a 3/3 by exiling that Archdruid. But that's okay because a 3/3 still dies to Anger of the Gods. So once our opponent commits more elves, like maybe that Dwinnen's Elite, maybe... Okay, so it's going to be another Azuri coming down. And it is another target elf, so we don't actually mind angering away this board. So we could also play the Chalice on 2. That would protect us against the Dwinnen's Elite coming down. So it kind of depends how much we care about that. The issue is that our opponent could pump up their elves, so that would make the Azuri into a 5/5. Mystic would be a 4/4, and the Ooze could be a 3/3. I don't think it's the end of the world if that happens, though. I'd rather just get the Chalice down. Although the issue with getting the Chalice down here is that it does stop our Blessed Alliance from working the way we want it to. Huh. Interesting spot here for sure. There aren't that many cards in this deck that are 2 mana, even though we do know about the Dwinnen's Elite. So I'm going to go with what I believe to be the safer play and just cast this Anger of the Gods, which should get rid of the Scavenging Ooze and the Azuri and leave behind the Elvish Mystic. Unfortunately, our hand isn't great, which is why it's still a pretty close game, actually. So the Anger is going to be a 2-for-1. We wish it was a Wrath of God, of course, because Wrath would stop our opponent from being able to regenerate that Elvish Mystic. And this is the 3rd copy of Azuri, so that's pretty unlucky, I think, that our opponent has found that here. Just going to go ahead, play this Journey fresh off the top of our deck, get rid of this Azuri. We have Blessed Alliance, but it's not at its best in this particular matchup. So we could cast it to just deal with an elf, but I'm going to take it and then maybe next turn use it. Although here's a Journey to Nowhere. Yeah, I'm gonna use the Blessed Alliance this turn. So we can play that with Escalate. So gain 4 and then get rid of one of these 1/1 elves. So it looks like our opponent may be finally drawing, clearly has 1 mana elves that are stuck in hand, and then maybe drawing some other cards that aren't optimal. And here's Nahiri, which is a great draw for us. So we can go ahead and tick down, get rid of the Dwinnen's Elite, or just loot. And I think I want to loot. This Chalice of the Void is not very good. And the reason why I looted there is, say our opponent draws like an Elvish Archdruid. They could pump up all of these elves and then take out the Nahiri, even with just the Elvish Mystic in play. So I think we wanted to at least make sure we got a loot, which we did. And now we've found Anger, which is great. So we can play the Anger here. Continue the loot process. And as long as our opponent doesn't have a card like Collecting Company, we're in a great spot. And I'm pretty happy I did not play the Chalice of the Void onto. So I'm just going to discard these chalices. Chalice on 1 is by far the most important number to have Chalice on for this matchup. So that's gonna do it. We were in a pretty dicey situation. We're able to draw our way out of it. So okay, cool. Looking at the sideboard now. Chalice is good on 1, even though the excess copies aren't good, but the first one is very good in this matchup. Blood Moon, on the other hand, doesn't do a whole lot against what's mostly a mono green deck. So I'm going to just go ahead and take out the Blood Moons completely. And rest in peace, the one copy there isn't good in the matchup. So we want sweepers for sure. So in comes the third Anger of the God. The second Wrath of God, that's easy. Then we want a Helix and an Elspeth. And then there's one more card we can board in. I think we keep the Blessed Alliances in the deck, even though they're not great. I'm gonna board in one Leyline of Sanctity in case our opponent is boarding in discard with that black mana that they have available to them. So we still have some suboptimal cards in our deck, but that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and submit this. And we found a Gemstone Caverns in our opening hand, which is pretty good. Now, we don't have a ton of early action or a sweeper. I think we still keep it, though. And I'm going to put this Gemstone Cavern into play. And I think we want to just go ahead and exile an Elspeth because we have two. Probably only need one copy of that card. And this Gemstone Caverns does produce white, which is a pretty big deal, considering we don't actually have a white land in our hand. Here's a Heritage Druid, okay. Wrath of God, that's a nice pickup. I am just going to play the Mountain, because in order to cast the Wrath, we would need to draw a white source anyway. So there's something to be said for cycling the Canyon Slough to find a white source. I'm going to take this hit, and it looks like our opponent's just passing the turn here. I think we want a white source more than this Canyon Slough, so I'm going to cycle it. And okay, cool. So here's an Aaron Mesa. And yeah, no reason to Wrath quite yet. We have the Lightning Helix available to us in case we need it here. So as we can see, a Blood Moon on this board wouldn't really disrupt our opponent very much. So in response to this Dwinn's Elite, we can just Lightning Helix away this Heritage Druid. And that would stop the additional 1/1 from being created with this Dwinn's Elite. So I like this play. Even though we have the Wrath, we don't want to play it until we need to. So this Helix should buy us a little bit of time, because now our opponent can't do anything for the turn. Here's a Journey to Nowhere. We could use that to take out the Dwinn's Elite. And yeah, I think that's the right play, because we're not going to be doing anything else this turn. We still don't have the double white, so it's just going to buy us time, even though we care more about cards like Elvish Archdruid and Azuri. It looks like our opponent is preparing for a Collected Company, but now that we have double white, well, sorry, we had double white before. I was forgetting about the Gemstone Cavern. So we had double white. Don't know why I was saying that earlier, but because of the luck counter. But anyways, I am going to go ahead and play the Elspeth Suns Champion. And plus. So now we're hoping our opponent doesn't company into something great, like maybe Azuri plus Archdruid. And we're able to untap. We can still use this Wrath of God if we want to. So there's the Azuri. That's bad for us, because now if our opponent has an untapped land, they can activate Azuri and give these Elves trample and then get rid of our Elspeth. So that would not work out the way we want it to. Just because it would be a 5/5 trampler and a 4/4 trampler. We could soak up 3 of the damage, but then we're still losing our Elspeth. So really no reason to block here. If our opponent does activate Azuri, they activate Azuri. And here's Nahiri, great draw step. So I'm going to play Nahiri and exile the Azuri. Leave back one of the Elves in order to block this Llanowar Elves. So definitely a pretty interesting game here developing. Our opponent's got 3 cards in hand still. We haven't had to burn our Wrath of God, but we certainly might have to do that pretty soon. Well, that's a pretty good draw step. Not going to lie about that. So I don't think we want to discard one of these. I'm actually just going to pass the turn here. I don't think we need to cast the Wrath yet. We have 2 soldiers. We can use them as basically as chump blockers this turn. And this is going to put our opponent to the test. We'll see how they want to navigate this spot. Maybe they have something like an Azuri. Just an attack with the Llanowar Elves. I think we do want to double block here and just get the Elves off the table, keep our Nahiri in play. And so this way we're getting even more value off the Wrath by not casting it last turn. So Sacred Foundry, that is a card we can loot away. But I'm just going to go ahead and cast the Wrath of God first here. Make sure nothing crazy happens. These creatures get swept away. And it looks like our opponent might have... Yeah, it's going to be a Chord of Calling, it looks like. So this chord is for 2. And it's going to be Selfless Spirit. So that's going to give all of our opponent's creatures indestructibility. That's pretty bad. So that was what I meant by something crazy happening. Something crazy did happen. So now we're back to being in kind of a tricky spot. I'm just going to minus the Nahiri to get rid of this Elvish Archdruid. And that's going to mean that now our Nahiri can be taken out, unfortunately. And here's another Archdruid. So our opponent's keeping the pressure on, continues to have Elves to play. Just a Plains off the top. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and use this Wrath of God. Our opponent seems to be being very careful about how many creatures they commit to the board, which is smart. So here's a lead the Stampede. We'll see what it can find. And our opponent actually found 3 Elves. So Reclamation Sage, that's huge. Nettle Sentinel, and an Azuri. So we're in a pretty rough spot. So the game looked good when we got the Elspeth down, but then our opponent was able to company into exactly what they needed to immediately get it off the table. And that was kind of the turning point. Now our opponent basically has a wealth of options. And you can tell that we're up against a pretty skilled Elves pilot. They know what they're doing here. Forge Tender, that's going to protect against a card like Anger of the Gods, which our opponent knows we have. Chalice, we can play that here. It's not going to do us a whole lot, but I'm going to play it on 3 to shut down that Reclamation Sage that we know about. But our opponent can attack us for a good chunk of damage this turn. And we need to draw an immediate answer to this Azuri, or else we're almost just dead already, as is. So we'll see if our opponent does go for the activation of Azuri, but it looks like no. So this could be a Dwindon's Elite as a follow-up. And unfortunately, our Wrath of Gods, which would be great here, they're already in the graveyard. So our out that we would want, this deck has 2 copies, and they're already in the graveyard. So yeah, our opponent's getting ready to close the door here. And that's just going to be game. So, game 3. All right. So, do we want to switch anything up? We did not see any reason to actually want Leyline, so I'm going to take that out. And I'm going to bring a Blood Moon back in, even though it's not great in this matchup. We're going to be on the play. Maybe we can do what we did the first game and get a Chalice on 1 down. This is kind of a weird hand. We have 3 Lightning Helixes, which are decent in this matchup. We can trade 1 for 1, but the issue is our opponent has cards like Company and Lead the Stampede. So trading 1 for 1 with Lightning Helix may not actually win us the game. So I'm gonna mulligan this. This hand, I mean, I think we have to keep it. We're already on 6. Keep the land on top there. We did not find the Chalice that we really wanted to be able to play on 1, which is how we won the first game, but this is a hand we can work with, for sure. So one option would be to just play the Simian Spirit Guide, or not play it rather, but exile it right now and just go for the Gideon. But I think I would rather wait, potentially play Nahiri next turn. And if our opponent's just attacking, hopefully there's no big follow-up here, like a Dwindon's Elite. Nettle Sentinel, we can deal with that. So here's a Simian Spirit Guide we just drew. We can play Nahiri and plus it. Or play Gideon would be the other option. I think we want to get the Nahiri into play. And I'm going to go ahead and pitch away the Simian Spirit Guide. Even though it's possible we draw something big like an Elves, I think it's the correct play overall. So there goes the Spirit Guide. We found a land, actually. I'm just going to hold the Canyon Slough. We're probably going to want to play it next turn. So this is a pretty critical situation. We'll see if our opponent can if our opponent just plays a few dorks, that'd be nice, or elves I should say, and we could just anger them away. So it looks like that may be what's happening. Our opponent's attacking Nahiri down to 3. We'll see what the follow-up is. Oh, it's actually a Selfless Spirit, so that's very annoying. Because that stops our anger plan from working out. So we're back to being in a pretty tough spot. We can play Gideon here. Prevent some of the damage that is going to be dealt to us. But even then, our Nahiri is pretty vulnerable. Another option is just play Anger of the Gods, but nothing great as far as options here. I am going to go ahead and pitch this Blessed Alliance. And I think we need to get this Selfless Spirit off the table. So I'm going to play the Anger of the Gods. This way, at least if we draw a sweeper next turn, we can potentially wipe away the board. And then the question is, do we play Canyon Slough or just play the basic Plains? I'm going to play the Canyon Slough. We draw something like 5-mana Gideon, or even we might just want to activate the Needle Spires that we have. We might just want this Canyon Slough in play. Now our opponent does have Heritage Druid, lots of mana to work with, so this could be bad for us this turn. Probably will be. Shaman of the Pact, okay. So that's going to bring us down to 14. And we'll see how our opponent navigates this turn. So it looks like an attack. So this means our opponent doesn't have a Company or a Chord. We really need another Anger or Wrath. There's a Chandra. Chandra, not what we were looking for. So I am going to loot with Nahiri. The question is what we want to loot away. I think we actually want the Plains. So it's between Chandra and Gideon. And yeah, I'm just going to get rid of the Gideon. So this turn we could activate the Needle Spires for a block. We could also play Chandra just to have it in play, which doesn't seem great. So yeah, I'm gonna keep up all the mana for the Needle Spires, which also isn't optimal. But at least we have a lot of live draws. Like if we draw Elspeth, should be pretty good, assuming our opponent doesn't Azorius like before. Looks like maybe another Shaman coming down. So it is going to be another Shaman of the pack. That's pretty good. So that's going to bring us all the way down to 9. But the fact that we do have the Needle Spires in play makes these attacks a little bit more tricky from our opponent's standpoint. And here's a lead the Stampede, so it looks like our opponent may not be going after Nahiri this turn after all. We'll see what this lead the Stampede is able to find. It's going to be another 3 cards. Wow. So Llanowar, Elves, Dwindon's Elite, and Shaman of the Pack are all getting revealed now off of this lead the Stampede. So yeah, this is a rough spot because we may just get burned out by these Shamans because our opponent's already played 2. Now there's the 3rd one that we're seeing revealed here. So if we don't find a sweeper, basically ASAP, we're just dead. So our opponent's now making attacks on Nahiri. Okay, so our opponent is going after Nahiri. I'll take that back. But we can activate the Needle Spires here and munch on one of these creatures. So it's going to be the Shaman. The Nahiri is going to die. Here's a Chalice, which it's a little bit late, to be honest. Our opponent can just dump all of their elves into play and kill us next turn, so I'm just going to play this Chandra. Hope for like a Lightning Helix, but it's a cast out on top of our deck. So, yep. Assuming our opponent sees the line, which it's pretty straightforward how to win this game, we are just dead. So our opponents can just dump their elves into play, and then play that Shaman of the Pack. So Dwindon's Elite, that's gonna push our opponent up to 6 elves in play. Now 3 more mana. This Llanowar Elves is going to get countered by our Chalice, so our opponent clearly wasn't thinking about that. And that's why you make your opponent play it out. Maybe they'll make a mistake, but it looks like that's not going to happen. There's the Shaman and the attack. So that's going to be the match here.